Because today I guess we're here to talk about older adults and children, and I was reminded as I was coming along, because obviously the title of the talk is Bridging the Gap, Bridging the Generation Gap, and that means that I'm going to talk about the importance of older people in the lives of children. I thought, gosh, I really am, to use that old expression of teaching my granny to suck eggs here, because obviously by dint of the fact that you're here, you're already well aware of how important older adults can be in the lives of a child. So what I'm going to look at a little bit, I suppose, is just why do we bother trying to bridge the generation gap, and then look at what are those key things that older adults do bring into the lives of a child, other than obviously the balls, wool, and the missing needles. So there's a lot of research. Psychologists love research, so when in doubt, always start with a piece of research, and there's lots of research done on the whole idea of this generation gap, and what is it, and what does it mean, and what should we do about it. I suppose one of the key things that people discover is that one of the things that really helps is to try and to get some sense of a cultural understanding. That it is great for older adults to get a sense of what the young person's culture is, and also for young people to get a sense of what the older adult's culture was and is. And when you begin to get that cultural understanding, things are easier, the generations mix easier, and life is better. But that would suggest then that, in order to have a successful bridging of the generation gap, there must be this cultural understanding. And what the research shows, in fact, is that it's not so much the outcome. It doesn't matter how much each generation understands the other one that's important, but just simply the process of bringing the generations together is what's important, which is why an initiative like the Knitting Bus is so vital, so crucial, and such a great idea. Because simply by bringing older adults and children together, you're doing what you need to do in terms of helping the two generations to understand each other. How much they understand each other, what difference does that make, is not quite so important as the simple fact that they're coming together at all. But we do know that older adults in particular have a very special role for children. If we think about, there's a phrase that's often used, you may have heard it takes a village to raise a child. Have you ever heard that? It's an old African, I think, saying. And the idea there, if you look at some of the cultures that are outside of Ireland, where older people have a much different role, one of their primary roles is as being the holders of all the collective wisdom of the tribe or of the community. So older people have all this gathered knowledge, and everybody respects the fact that this is there, and so they're the people to tap into. When you want to know something, when you don't want to be reinventing the wheel, you go and ask your elders, well, what's the story with this wheel thing? How do we do that? Oh, should we build many a wheel in our time? The square ones don't work so well, we discovered. If you try and make it round, it goes around. And so, in this way then, one of the things that we're trying to do with children and older adults is to allow children to just dip their toes into this collective wisdom. There's an awful lot of knowledge there, and I think young people don't necessarily think of going to older people now because we've got the internet. So we just think, oh, if I want to find something out, I'll just Google it. And yet it's a much more enriching experience when perhaps you can Google it as well, but when you actually ask other people about it. And you discover that not just do you get the information, but you also get a context perhaps and a story that goes with it. So one of the other things we know about older adults is as well that they're great storytellers. And Ireland has a great storytelling tradition. And the benefit of older people telling stories to younger people is that they tend to be full of allegories and full of good value advice, don't they? They're never just a story simply for the sake of a story. There's always a little bit of a moral at the back of it. And one of the things that parents, I think, struggle with in our age now, certainly with the advent of the internet and all that has brought, is trying to get a good, solid value message and moral message to our young people. How do we actually instill in children what are good values to have? And yet we know, because we would feel that we probably have quite strong values. We got them from our parents got them from their parents, and those parents are like the grandparents and the great-grandparents. So that means that there's all this knowledge out there. And that's a great thing. So storytelling is another really important role that older people have. The other thing that grannies and granddads are great at is telling the history of the family. I know my daughter had to do a project there recently, last year, in fact, in school, and she had to do the family tree. And it was really quite an enriching thing for our family, because I hadn't really thought to go back to my dad or my mum and find out about, their dads and their mums, because I kind of knew them because they were my grandparents, and I kind of felt I knew the story. But it really was amazing when I heard my dad talking to my daughter about his life. And so suddenly my daughter had this great insight into, I'd always wondered why, he was living in a modest house in Dublin and his brother was living in a fabulous mansion over in Manchester. And of course the reason was that my dad had to start working when he was 14 because his dad became injured in a work-related accident and couldn't work, and so my dad had to go out and start earning money. So he started working at Guinness's. It's a very fine institution, and happily he stayed there for the next 40 years working. And so he went and he organised for his brother to go to college. So his brother did a commerce degree and went on to make his millions. And my dad continued to work in Guinness's. So we got great medical experience and used to the pool over the years. We haven't quite just got what his brother has. So I always wondered about that. So when I hear my dad telling the story to my daughter, suddenly it takes on a whole new meaning, because he's obviously trying to explain a whole context. She had no idea, this idea that there'd be a big family living in a tiny house with no money coming in, and you'd have to start work when you're age 14. There she was, 9 at the time. Another thing that we know that older adults do is that they provide care, direct care to a lot of children. And so that's another great thing, because I think older people, certainly by the time you've had your own children, then probably your own grandchildren, and in most cases older people are looking after their grandchildren. And that means that they've got a very different kind of relationship, don't they? They don't have to be quite so harsh. They don't have to quite set the limits in the same way. And so things are just a little bit easier. Do you find your grannies are nicer than your mums and dads at times? Are they nicer to you? Yeah? I know my mother is nicer to my children than she ever was to me. So I'm assuming that there's something in that for this link. And so I think it's because I guess they don't have to take the same level of responsibility in totality. They obviously do when they're looking after a child, but not in this total sense of it. And I have, my grandmother is dead now, but when she was alive, she was a very reserved woman, I always found her difficult to talk to, fantastic cook, but difficult to talk to. So, if ever we were talking, we were at the quality of her food. And so my children got to know her before she died, and when she did die, she left a small bit of money to each of her children. And we were talking last night at the dinner table. I was explaining that I was coming up here to talk about the knitting bus, and my children were interested because they knit. And then I was saying, I'm going to get to meet the president, it would be great. And they were like, oh, right, yeah, well, what's it about? And I was saying, oh, you're right, that the real purpose of it is that it's about older people, and older people get to know younger people, and people really understand about their grannies and their granddads and stuff. And I said, like we have great Granny Mary's trampoline at the back. Because when my mother got this bit of money, she passed some of it on. She gave us €500, which was not a small sum at the time. And she said, look, you can do what you like with the money. She said, my mum just gave it, and I'm giving something to you. She said, well, will you do me a favour? She said, get us something, or get something to remember your granny by. So we bought a trampoline. And so we were talking about the trampoline, Great Granny Mary's trampoline, and my son, who's 7, said to me, he said, we're bouncing all over Great Granny Mary's grave. I thought, oh, that's not quite what the trampoline's about. Actually, we're bouncing in memory of Great Granny Mary, because we can remember Great Granny Mary when we're bouncing around. Not bouncing on her grave, I'm not sure she appreciates that. But it's great, I think, when older adults can care for children. I know my children certainly love going to their grannies, and we got to go to the People of the Year Awards last week, and so myself and my wife abandoned our children to the care of their granny and granddad. They had a great time, we had a great time as well, so we needed to go home to my parents' house. It was fantastic. We picked everyone up the next day, and of course they were so well fed. They'd watched every single DVD, known to man, along with MasterChef and the whole lot, all on series, which is a big treat for them, because they don't get to do it when they're at home. The other thing I want to say, though, is just that, the other thing I was saying about parents, parents struggle with values. How do you pass on morals? How do you pass on values? And we all know that when children get to the age of being teenagers, that often there's this big communication breakdown that can occur. And actually, I believe that older people can be just the perfect link at that stage in the young person's life, because they don't have to fight with the young person, they don't have to set the limits, they don't have to set the rules, but they can be very understanding. And actually, I think a lot of teenagers need mentors. They need people that they can look up to. They need people that they can really believe in, who, if you like, act as a leader for them. And I think older people, grannies, granddads, can be that person. And I think a project like the Knitting Bus certainly allows us, I think, to look a little bit beyond your own immediate family, your own immediate extended family, and instead look beyond that into the wider community. Because there are people in the community that we know nothing about. Damien mentioned that I started playing bridge, and I live in a very small village called Gunlow in County Clare. I won't ask anyone to spell that word, Gunlow, or even try to pronounce it. I'm trying to call it Goonie Land, because that's close to invented. But Gunlow is such a small parish that it's very hard to get into the parish unless you're either very much into the Catholic Church and the parish itself, or if you're very much into the GAA, or if you've got a child in the national school. And we didn't fit into any of those, particularly when we arrived, although we managed to get into the parish, we got into the GAA, we decided not to send our children to the local national school. And then I started playing bridge, which for me was an introduction to a whole new group in the community, because, and it's one of those unfortunate things at the moment, but bridge is mainly populated by older people. and I would be considered one of the young ones there.